All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with Carla Fowler. Carla, welcome. So awesome to have you on the show today.
Thanks so much, Kevin. It
I'll
is
tell
a lovely day in Tucson, and I hear it's so nice in Washington. So it's
oh,
just fun to be connecting.
I'll tell you know what? August is the best time of year in Washington State. This is the perfect weather and
Uh, yes.
yeah.
I grew up in the Seattle area, and so you're like telling me the thing. I'm like, oh yeah, I say that to everybody.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I've been looking forward to this conversation with you today. And you and I got to connect earlier. And in fact, I want to start off by giving a shout out to Brianna and the folks over at the Interview Valet platform because without them, without Brianna, you and I would have probably never even met Carla. And I just want to, just honor that relationship because it means a lot. And so I'm sure they mean a lot to you too and stuff.
They absolutely do. I'll also add a shout out to Kristen Nolan, who is
Oh,
the person
yes.
on the guest side that I work with really closely, and their team has been so awesome. I love that you're giving them a shout out. They work really hard, and I think of all the people I would not have met if not for them,
Yeah.
including you.
Yeah,
So.
for sure, for sure. Well, what I want to do is, Carl, I want to start by turning it over to you so that we can set a little bit of context here. And I want to give you the opportunity to talk about, what you do and who you serve and what inspires you most about the work you get to do and the impact you're making in the world. And also give us some of the backstory. How did you get into doing what you do now?
Well, I love this story because, again, I think a lot of times we think we have to have this like super linear path to get a place.
Yeah.
And mine was linear for a while and then took a major left turn. And I think it's great to always just have stories where you can always make pivots in your career.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what I do, and part of what really has been interesting me for the past 12 years is that I have an executive coaching practice
Okay.
and firm. It's called THAXA, and it really is centered around using performance science to help leaders and executives really improve their results and their impact and their leadership, and really have some foundation for that. So we have a lot of great ideas and tools that come out of all the different disciplines that think about performance. I mean, this is everything from, the people who think about strategy, from the business schools to even our own physiology and how that impacts our decision making, our ability to connect with others. And as we go into the backstory, I am a science nerd at heart, and so have always also really wanted to have an impact on people. And so one way to think about this practice is this is this wonderful expression for me of blending the science with really practical application
Uh-huh.
because leaders are busy and they have big goals, they have impacts they want to make. And I think sometimes we pretend like, oh, we're just supposed to know how to lead or any of these things. And so I love having a rigorous basis for what do we talk about? How do we help support them? And
Mhm.
every person needs something different. And performance science is certainly broad and deep. And that gives us a lot of different places to look as we're thinking about like how to support them.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Typically, I work with clients, probably about 50 to 60 leaders at a time,
Okay.
and it's industry agnostic. So I love that I get to work with people who are doing all these different interesting things. So everything from like high level management consulting to retail and consumer goods to tech or biotech leadership, public sector leaders as well. So it's this really broad range. And for me, that's both interesting, but I think it always encourages me to stay curious because, of
Uh-huh.
course, all these people are experts at things that I'm not an expert at. And it really encourages and almost requires at all times to really make my partners or my clients, they are a partner
Uh-huh.
in that coaching process. And so That's a little bit about what I am doing now, but how I got here is definitely not typical for the industry. So I actually started my career more in the science realm. So
Okay.
I went through an MD PhD program at the University of Washington,
Oh,
and that is what that is more or less is it's a program to train academic physicians. And the goal is to help have doctors who both can interact with patients and know how to treat patients medically, but also who have a really good foundation in biological sciences and sometimes other sciences as well.
okay.
So again, this is sort of a theme for me is the merging of disciplines,
Yeah. Yep.
which is something that inspires me, like what we can learn from other people, what we can learn from people who have a different set of expertise
Mm.
from us. And I think that is one theme that comes out sort of again and again in my career is I always am interested in what happens at those intersections.
Yeah.
Um, so that's where I started my career. And that took about most of my 20s. So
Okay.
I was graduating from that in my early 30s. And I matched to do general surgery, which you have to go do a residency after you finish that. And I have always been interested in high performance. It's something that I think since the fifth grade, I have just been interested in how people do challenging things.
Yeah.
And I liked the that general surgery was both had a hands-on component, like a procedural component, but also had a important like thinking and decision-making component. And so there were a number of things that drew me to it as a very challenging field. And I think over the course of that year, this is one of those interesting times when you have to think about like, hey, is this working for me at this point in my life? Is this exactly where I see myself going? And sometimes you have to make really hard decisions.
Yeah.
And so for me, one of the interesting decisions during that time was just that it didn't feel quite right, that the fit was not quite right. And I really didn't, didn't want to, continue to take up that space in a program and also continue to pursue that, 7-year residency or whatever it was, if I actually
Mhm.
needed to go in a different direction. And I think one of the things for me was I really wanted to explore what, like, is it actually performance that you're interested in? Like, or is that just a thing that you want to explore and to really work with people one on one on that topic
Okay.
more than practice medicine at this moment? And I think for me, there was a bit of an itch that was like, I'm really interested in this, and I'm not sure this general surgery is quite a right fit for me.
Mhm.
And I made a really big leap, which is not common. I finished the year. I told them they should fill my spot, but finished the year. And I totally took a leap into building something that was outside a structure and saying, I need to pursue this. I need to think about how I might turn this into something.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and you asked about like what inspires me and why go into coaching. Certainly, I had a lot of skills and talents kind of in the like patient dialogue, client-centered dialogue space,
Okay.
which is something they teach you in medical school. But I had some natural talent at it as well, and it was very satisfying to me, like to talk with people about decision making, about tough decision making,
Mhm.
to help pull out what are their values, what are the things that matter to them, what are their goals, what are they wanting to achieve or have happen, and so through starting the coaching practice, I think one of the things that really inspired me, I've always been on this path of thinking, how can I apply my talents to help people, to make an impact, a tangible impact?
Yeah.
I think this is why I didn't end up on a truly academic pathway, being a professor or doing only research, was because I really love to see that tangible impact. And for me, the thing I realized in coaching was that if I could help connect leaders to science that would and ideas that would help them improve like their ability to inspire or connect or lead or understand it, if I could improve them even just a little bit, like help them do that work, that the number of people who would be impacted by that and who would get the downstream
Yeah.
effect
Yeah.
would be many.
Yes.
And I also think that we all have this desire to fulfill our potentials, to really be um, as good as we can be, to be learning and growing. And I think when we feel like we have the opportunity to do that, the world is a better place. That when we are all feeling like we're in motion, that we're not stagnant, that we're not limited in our opportunities. And so I think all of this is something that really drives me to say, how do you help more people feel like they have access to the ideas and the tools they need to do the hard work of growing?
Yeah.
And that is a fundamental impact on the world. And so that's a big piece of, I think, what inspired me to go into coaching
Yeah.
was that understanding.
Yeah.
And so here we are, 12 years later. I did start a practice. I designed a methodology. I had to put a lot of my PhD, like figure out how to solve an unstructured problem tools to work.
Mhm.
And so here we are, 12 years later.
Yeah. Wow. And like I listen to you and like, I think of, I mean, I love serving high performing entrepreneurs too. And to me, like the high performing entrepreneur, what inspires me so much, I love just watching them do their thing, because they make it look so easy because they put in so many hours to get to where they are. And the same is true of athletes. You think, I mean, I remember, gosh, years ago, back in the 2000s, I remember Michael Phelps in the Olympics and stuff, and how fascinated I was. I look at how, like, and he spent hours and hours in that pool to be able to get to where he was at the Olympics and win like he did at the Olympics and stuff. And like that's going back years ago. I mean, I recently saw this photo. I don't know where I ran into it, but it was social media somewhere. It was this Chinook helicopter pilot, and the Chinook helicopter is the one with the two blades on top of it. And he had the back wheels of that thing somewhere in the mountains somewhere. I don't know, maybe Central America. I don't know where he was at, but it was a little teeny shack in the mountains. He had the back wheels perched down, sitting on that, while the front of the helicopter is just hovering there. And these crew, these military guys, are getting in, climbing up that roof of that shack and getting in the back of that helicopter as he just lets it hover there, and people who are, like I said, high performing people that have just put in their hours to do what they do. And they make it look so easy. And yet at the same time, if we can figure out how to use our God-given gifts, our abilities that we have acquired over the years to be of service to these people, um, we get to make a really big impact. It's that combination of bringing our gifts and abilities to the table, coupled with who we choose to serve, which you and I have both choose to serve high performing people and stuff. And it ends up being this really magical sweet spot, and I get to make this really big impact where the end users of what I do, of what you do, Carla, they may never know we were even there. And that's okay because we don't care about that. We know what we're doing and stuff, and being behind the scenes, we're totally cool with that. And
It's so true, Kevin. And I think one of the really important things about even as I think about helping people have this impact that they want to have is part of the gift and part of the importance is that they know how they did it.
yeah,
And like a coach is a tool, but they are the athlete on the field. They have to do it, and they have to feel confident that they did it.
yes,
Um, and so yes, it's absolutely behind the scenes, but so satisfying and fulfilling to see what individual clients do with a particular idea or something. I love it when clients come back and they're like, "Well, you said it this way, but I actually did it this way, and it totally worked." And I'm like, fantastic.
yeah,
We have to adapt things to each individual, and I love it whether it's the idea as is or just the seed of an idea that then turns into something for someone. It's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So, what is an example of a result that you've helped a client get, Carla, that you are just incredibly proud of?
Oh, this is always a hard question for me because actually everyone is so different and I work with so many different people that calling out one always can feel a little like I'm like, oh, but there's so many different things. Um, you know, uh, I think there are different flavors of this. Sometimes there is a result that for example, help someone truly like motivate their team in a really big way, like where the team momentum grows in a way that what sort of wasn't possible before. So, like a great example of this is helping people get to mental clarity as a leader has a really big impact. You might think that having a leader spend some time thinking and getting them really focused, so focus is one of the themes that I talk a lot about with clients, that wouldn't have anything to do with team motivation. Like that those are two separate buckets in performance. But it turns out they have a lot to do with each other. So, for example, I had a client, and I always start my sort of engagements with it's a multi-hour focus session. I used to do 5 hours. Now I typically do 3 hours, but we
Okay.
use that time to really help them get clarity about what their goals are and also what's most important. What are the most important priorities that are going to drive them towards that? So we're trying to get them out of the business of having laundry lists of like, we're trying to do everything to see what works, and instead to say, can we be thoughtful about what's actually most important and what's
Mhm.
going to be the best use of your resources?
Yeah.
And so we do this session. We do a lot of discussion to try and sort out what those priorities are, and then we just build a framework out of them. It's just sort of a summary framework. So I worked with this leader to help them create their framework, and they actually took their framework back and shared it with their team. So some people
Okay.
choose to do this, some people don't. But regardless, he did, and he came back and said, "Carla, my team just lit up." And it was this moment where they hadn't yet had the clarity about what are we aiming at,
Mhm.
what's most important, where do I fit in as a team member? Like there were team members who were like, oh, that priority or that sub priority right there, that's mine. Like that's me. That's why I matter. And I can see myself on this framework and the role and the function that is most important for me to do. And what I loved about this story, and this was pretty early in my coaching practice, but
Okay.
it was this moment where I was seeing people impacted by a principle that I had decided I had pulled out of performance science, and I said, I think this is a principle that punches above its weight, which is mental clarity and focus, and had worked with one person on it, but the impact of that had flowed through to the team. And not only did they have clarity and were more aligned after that, but they were actually really motivated.
Okay.
And I this is one of the reasons I'm bringing up this as an example is because I think it shows the power of performance science and how when you really can focus on principles that matter most, you often see multiple downstream effects from them.
Okay.
And so in this case, you're seeing a mindset and a motivational, a psychological shift in a team based on sort of a clarity and a strategy input.
Mhm.
And so I love this story because there are many different kinds of impacts I can have, but that's why I share this one because of what it shows about performance science
Yeah.
and its impact.
Very cool. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, okay. So now that we've got a little bit of context set, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit and I'm going to reiterate the question around relationships for the benefit of our listeners. So, Carla, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons who completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationships.
Well, I love that this is the theme of your podcast, Kevin. And And relationships can look all sorts of different ways. But
Yeah.
when I learned that this was the theme of your podcast, definitely two different individuals stuck out to me,
Okay.
and they're from very different points in my life. So this is actually, and their impacts were in different realms of my life. So
Okay.
um, the first person who comes to mind is actually one of my middle school teachers.
All right.
So we're going to go way back. But I think middle school is a point in my life when I can really start to see like becoming the seeds of becoming like who I see myself as an adult. And we of course are always growing and changing. But this middle school teacher, her name was Fran Call, and she is a alternative outdoor education teacher.
Okay.
And she ran a program for seventh and eighth graders. So think like 11 and 12-year-olds, maybe 13-year-olds.
Hmm.
And it was basically she had us do outdoor endurance activities as opposed to the typical PE. So
Okay.
you would show up at the last period of every day and you would either be doing some kind of endurance run, an endurance bike, and on Fridays we would play games, but the games were all like run and hide, run around and hide in the woods and get all like, scraped up by the blackberry bushes, and they were very intensive.
Uh-huh.
And but it wasn't just that. So she, part of the curriculum was she had us train for in the spring each year and run the local half marathon. So we would have a training program for it, and we would all complete it as a requirement of the class. She also had, it goes up from there. So she also had these other activities that were required. So one of them was a 55-mile walk to be
Wow.
completed in
Wow.
24 hours. So we all started as a group and we walked around Lake Washington, which is a big lake right by Seattle, Washington. And we would stop every 4 or 5 miles to rest, but we just kept going. So you didn't sleep. And, bless the parents who came with us.
Wow. Wow.
But you're really hurting by the end of that.
Yeah.
And, but that was a piece of the class. We would go on hikes on the weekend, and if there was a glacier lake, you were going in it, sometimes multiple times, like up to your neck.
Wow.
So these are just to give you a little bit of a flavor of the kinds of challenge, like physical challenges she came up with. And there were all these smattering other weird ones, like, stilting up a mile long hill. Lots of fun ones too. But I'm bringing her up because uh, the impact she had, and this was definitely in the physical realm, but obviously these physical pursuits have a mental component to them as
Sure.
well. But she expected a lot of us. And she didn't necessarily take into the class like the super athletic kids. And she just made it very clear that everyone would finish, everyone would support each other. She was pretty strict. And she had a whistle, which was how she ran class. But she expected there was no coddling. You were expected to show up. You were expected to be responsible with your gear, and you were expected to finish. And I think for many of us, I don't know when we would have gotten that opportunity. I was fortunate in my family, like we had been backpacking since I was like 5. And so I got the start of that kind of sort of physical challenge where it's like, nope, we're all going into the wilderness.
Hmm.
And the only way out is on your own 2 feet. There are no carries.
Yeah.
um, but I think this, not just expecting a lot of us, but then giving us these opportunities where I don't know how everyone else figured it out in their own brains, but like for me, you have to figure out how to keep going when your feet really hurt.
Yeah.
You have to figure out how to believe in yourself. There's a tremendous amount of grit development.
Yeah.
Um, and also just very practical, I don't know, how do you manage yourself outside in the wilderness? Those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And um, and you had to be really brave. Like I remember going on the summer bike trip, which about 13 of us went on. It wasn't the whole group, but and it was the first time I was gone from my house for like a month. So no parents on the trip. You had to manage
Wow.
your money. You had to manage your gear. We camped. We didn't have like anyone carrying our gear along with us, and we biked sort of across Canada from the West Coast down into Glacier National Park in Montana, and took us about a month on the
Wow.
Canadian highways. But well, I think I cried multiple nights of that trip. I think I was 11. I was also very small at that time.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so, yeah, I think, and it isn't easy to do something like that, I think, as a teacher. I can't imagine the challenges of getting parents on board with a strict program, where you weren't going to coddle the kids. And I think she's a really incredible, incredible woman. And she does really cool stuff still. Like she leads seniors on walks and all these different things. So she's just an inspirational teacher, and certainly from my standpoint had a tremendous impact on my ability to like go do hard things
Yeah.
for that.
Wow. Listening to you share about that experience, Carla, I think of like when I was a kid, about that age, and each year they did this big fundraiser for March of Dimes, and it was called the Walkathon, and it was 20 miles.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time as a kid that I ever did that. I didn't finish the 20 miles. I finished 16 and my feet hurt so bad. And
Yes.
but then the next year I did the 20 miles. And so doing 55 miles, I'm just like, wow. You know, for a kid that age. But I think, when I was a little bit older, right out of high school at 17 years old, I joined the Army. And in August of
Yeah.
1983, I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for basic training. And I remember my first
Amazing.
day waking up in basic training was to we were in rooms where there was like 8 guys in each room, 4 bunk beds, 2 guys on
Yes.
each bed, and no doors on the rooms. And that morning I woke up to the light switch in the hallway coming on, and then I hear this bang, bang, crash, crash, and I watch this garbage can lid go flying by my room because the drill sergeant had thrown it down the hallway, and it's just banging down the hallway. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? Because he's yelling, get up, get up, get out of bed. But you know what? That whole experience, I mean, those drill sergeants were definitely not easy on us at all.
No,
But
I
they
cannot imagine.
brought us together as a team. It was like we had to figure out and get our act together and do the tasks that the drill sergeants put in front of us. Otherwise, it was going to face their wrath, and we didn't really want that.
No.
So and
No,
so
but
it
you
did.
have to figure it out. And
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
the power of that is an experience as a young person,
Yeah.
right? Like you weren't a kid at that point, but like you were still like developing into adulthood. And so yeah, sorting
Yeah.
out how do you deal with that challenge? How do you work together?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, that must have been an incredible experience.
Yeah.
Like very challenging.
Well, and I listened to you share what you did. I'm just like, wow, that's a lot for a young kid for sure. But you made that choice, and she was like, okay, anybody who makes the choice to be here, I'm going to make sure, and I'm going to make it worth your while because we're going to do some serious growth together.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is definitely the first person who comes to
Yep.
mind.
Yep. And so you got one more person you went on her. So I'll let you continue on here.
Yeah. Well, the second person is my advisor for my PhD.
Okay.
So I did, this is much later in life, probably, goodness, I don't know, like I was probably 27, something like that.
Okay.
But you pick your advisor. So I knew I wanted to be an immunologist, and I also knew that I wanted to work with someone who to put it bluntly, was very good in their field. Because if you're going to learn, if this person is going to have an outsized impact on, what you learn and how good you are at the end of this whole process, well, you get to pick that person. And so I worked in Phil Greenberg's lab, and he is known for being very early in the T cell immunotherapy for cancer space, which we don't
Okay.
have to go into the details of that, but a particular slice of immunology, and that I was very interested in. And so, I did you do a little internship and then you basically ask, like, will you be my advisor? And he did say yes. And then you have to figure out what your project is. But that ends up being something that you work on pretty independently. So you work
Okay.
in their lab, like they are financially supporting you, but you're basically you are an employee of sorts,
Uh-huh.
but you're also a student. And notably, like Phil was a very hands-off mentor. And I think that was very good for me because med school is a quite structured experience. It's kind of like you get on the train and it's not quite this, but the train will carry you along, but you have to like work really hard, while you're doing it. So
Mhm.
it's not that it's easy, but it's very structured. The tracks are kind of laid out. PhD is a whole different ballgame. You show up not knowing the answer every day, and you have to figure out how to figure out what the answer is. What experiments are you going to run? And
Uh-huh.
what was really notable about Phil is that he, if Fran Call pushed my physical endurance, like that piece, that sort of mental toughness, Phil really pushed on the quality of my thinking.
Okay.
And he was a stickler for it wasn't just about coming up with ideas. So like if I came into his office and I'd be like, Phil, I'm gonna run this experiment. I'm gonna run this experiment. And he'd be like, why are you going to do that? That it wasn't about busyness or doing things. And I mean, I would have learned something from those experiments, but he was very much a push for strategy and for clarity of thinking. Like, okay, sure, but why would what you learn be valuable? And is there something more valuable you should be learning? Are there questions you should be asking that the field would appreciate the answers to more versus just gathering some facts about stuff that don't link together into a bigger arc of learning? And and so that was something I'm a very productive person, and I was always good at sort of being busy at things. But I think one of the big impacts for me of having him in as an advisor was really being forced to think about like, well, what actually matters most here? What
Okay.
is most important? What should you prioritize? And if that sounds like an echo from earlier in our conversation, I think you can see in my coaching, like the impact of like having him as a mentor
Yeah.
in terms of working with leaders to say, this thinking work is actually really important and it can save you a bunch of like
Mm.
busyness. I mean, you'll still be busy, but it will increase the impact of the work you do if you can take that step back, spend that time to really do the hard work of thinking
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
that doesn't always have the immediate, gratification of like, oh, I did a thing, check.
Yeah. Yeah.
But is so important for lining up like something that might take years to accomplish. And that was certainly the
Mhm.
case for a PhD.
Yeah.
So that is the thing that I think I just want to recognize and honor him for is that was his contribution like to my career and my development. And it's so fundamental to what I do now that it just was a total standout to me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think of some of the mentors that I've had in my life over the years, and they're really good at asking such powerful questions that do get you thinking, you know,
yeah.
and thinking about stuff that we might not normally think about or might not think to think about, and yet what ultimately comes from that is just such powerful stuff. And I mean, I know, yeah, I mean, it wasn't that many years ago. I mean, I've been doing what I do for, well, it's been my full-time gig for since 2000, so 8 years now.
Mhm.
And if you would have told me even 8 years ago that I'd be doing what I'm doing now and serving the kind and caliber of entrepreneur that I serve now, and that I would have not been able to see that 8 years ago, not at all. And yet that's what's transpired now. And it's through those mentors that I've had that have pushed me to just grow and get out of my own comfort zone a little bit and my own way of thinking in the moment to think about well, what is possible if we start looking at it this way, or what if we looked at it this way, and it's been such had such a profound impact, not only on my life, but so many other people's lives, because I just continue to grow and become more and more effective at doing what I do,
Mhm.
you know. And like I said, you and I are in this spot where, because of who we choose to serve, we get to have a really big impact by bringing our gifts and abilities to the table to help them and stuff. And so, if you like, what is an example of a situation where you personally got to make a really substantial impact, and maybe even in the moment, maybe it even surprised you a little bit, but yet you also know that would have never been possible if not for your relationship with either one of the two people that you've just been talking about? What's an example of something like that?
Mm. So one example is, again, as I talk with people and say, okay, what's really most important here? And one of the great things about not being in other people's industries is I get to ask questions like, explain to me how that works.
Uh-huh.
But getting them to talk out loud to me about, well, like what what might be important. And one of the interesting things about like having people do that is when we're forced to explain to someone else how something works, it forces our brains to slow down
Mhm.
and think about things differently. So, like for example, I was working with an entrepreneur, and they had this goal of selling their company. They wanted to sell it for a particular amount of money, and in certain number of years in the future. And so I was just asking questions about that. We were trying to think about what would be most important to help them push towards that outcome. And so I was asking some questions, and then I like said, well, how is valuation in your space determined, right? Like it's different,
Uh-huh.
obviously, like they're all formulas if it's a SaaS company, if it's
Yeah.
a this, if it's that, right? So uh, um, the person stopped, and then they were like, oh, I'm not even sure they answered my question. I think they just said, I need to raise my prices immediately. So the question that wasn't answered was simply that there needed to be sort of a record of certain amount of revenue in
Mhm.
previous years would be a huge determining factor, and that raising price was a simple move that could happen in sort of one step that
Yeah.
would have a lasting impact years in the future on like what valuations the company could be
Yes.
sold for.
Yeah.
And in fact, that was a successful outcome for that person. And that one moment probably contributed to like a million or more
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
the end of the day. And so, um, again, not you can't plan for those kinds of moments,
Yeah.
but I think part of coaching, and you probably experienced this too, Kevin, is what is a process? You can have a process that tends to, it like turns the soil, right? And the
Yeah.
goal is to turn something up. And you don't
Yeah.
know what it's going to be, and you don't know when it's going to happen. But like sometimes that's what it looks like if
Yes.
you have a good process.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. And that's such a beautiful example right there, of what you said, just having a process and just applying it in different scenarios and stuff. And the process doesn't change, but the scenario or the setting may very well change.
Mhm.
But the process can stay static, and that's all I've been doing for years is I've taken it to a whole bunch of different places, but I do essentially the same exact thing with different people. And so,
Mhm.
and depending on who we're doing it for, the outcome can be, I mean, I I regularly introduce people where it leads to 5 figure, 6 figure, 7 figure deals. And I haven't done an 8 figure deal yet, but you know what? I'm heading that direction, and it's just a matter of time. It's a matter of me meeting the right people and finding the right opportunity to be able to make that happen and stuff. And it'll happen. And it's like I said, it's as much it's it's that combination of our gifts and who we serve, because
Mhm.
I can only get the kind of results like that with certain people. I can't do that with anybody and everybody, And so, but it jazzes me thinking about making the biggest impact. And it's not about seven figures or eight figures at all. It's about the impact. The revenue is just the byproduct of impact. The more impact we make, more revenue gets created and stuff. And that's exactly what you're talking about.
Mhm.
Well, Carla, I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation today and just share from your heart for anybody that's listening to this and going, wow, Kevin, I really appreciate some of the stuff that Carla shared. I really like how she shows up. And maybe they're thinking like, man, maybe I might like to talk with Carla and stuff. Any resources, any websites we can share with folks?
Yeah, absolutely. My website is at thaxa.com.
Okay.
That's THAXA. And that is a wonderful place to learn more about coaching. You can learn a little more about my background. You can message me through the site there.
Okay.
And if people are just interested in performance science, I'm posting on LinkedIn. So there's often great ideas there. And I'm at Carla-Fowler. So you can absolutely follow along there.
Awesome. Awesome. Any last thing you feel led to share, Carla, before we call it a wrap?
Oh, goodness. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for having me. I love the idea of just thinking deeply about how relationships end up creating impacts in our lives, and they can look really different kinds of things. But um, thinking about not just what do I need to do, but like who are the people around me, I think is just one of those important things.
Yeah, for sure. Well, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation today, Carla. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate you.
Thanks, Kevin.